My background is in computer science, so a lot of the things that we were talking about this morning around artificial intelligence, machine learning, that's where my expertise lies, and had a really great discussion with a couple of founders who had this idea of revolutionizing the way that we do procurement and supply chain in business aviation, and they said we could use someone who knows a bit about the data structures and the AI pieces of this to come on board. And that was 2 years ago, and you fall in love with all these beautiful airplanes, I guess, so I'm stuck here now.
Paolo, you've got an interesting background. You ran airlines in Italy.
Yeah, I did, and a seaplane airline, very hard to do. Then I did a regional airline, also very hard to do. And then I started doing the really hard bit, which is making software to make it all happen. And so we've been at it for over 10 years in building the whole workflow for the industry, managing the planes and doing the sales and the dispatch and everything around it. And so I've been completing the circle, and after 30 years in technology and an avid pilot, in bringing the two together. And today, I'm very happy to be also with AVIAA leading an effort to bring all the services in business aviation, the digital services, together via APIs. This is something that we're going to be talking a lot about this year.
Adam, you were the future once. You set up an online charter broker 10 years ago. Do you want to take us through your journey?
Well, I think in any tech company, 10 years is a lifetime. So it's clearly obvious things will move on. But we still are there at the forefront. It's great. We've now part of One Sky, which is a group of companies. We have FlexJet in the States with fractional ownership. Sentient, the largest card supplier in the industry, and now PrivateFly, which is combined with Skyjet. So we have a broad range of products connecting the customer with the aircraft.
And Patrick, you've been doing the hardest job, as you always tell everyone, in aviation. 23 years you've been running a
Well, it's not quite 23 years. I started at the age of 8 in 1967, so I'm just turned 60. I was away at boarding school, and we had every Tuesday afternoon something called the CCF, the Combined Cadet Force, and I was in the RAF section. And my first experience of flying was with a rubber bungee that took this plastic or wooden glider up into the air. We had about 20 pupils on the left-hand side, 20 pupils on the right-hand side, and somebody held the tail, and they walked the elastic band until it stretched no more, and then they let go, and up you went. We have moved on slightly from that. I sort of had a break from aviation. I had a career in the City of London. And then in 1995, I met up with a couple of guys, and we sort of put together a business plan to set up a business jet operation. And our first flight, inaugural flight, was on April Fool's Day, 1996. And we went from there. And 1st of April was a good date for us. We chose it because the RAF was formed on April Fool's Day 1918, and we wanted to sort of slightly emulate that going forward. We started with small piston aircraft, and we're now, as a group, I'm CEO of Luxaviation UK. As a group, we have 250 aircraft around the world, all levels of business jets that you'd expect to see, from ACJ down to Mustangs and Pilatus PC-12s. And we also are the largest helicopter operator in the world. We have over 70 helicopters that we manage around the world. So we've expanded rapidly. And we think, although this is a new area of industry for us, I think it's an exciting one, perhaps not short term, but maybe medium and long term, that we're going to see changes going on.
So looking at business aviation, it's relatively simple, isn't it? Someone goes onto the PrivateFly website, books a charter, you get an email, Patrick, your pilot flies there.
We don't like email.
Sorry, you get a...
API link.
We get a phone call.
What?
I mean, I think the source for flying is a myriad of things. It comes through technology, it comes through IT platforms, it comes through emails still, maybe not for Adam. A lot of our business comes through brokers, of people that actually go out on a daily basis and are actually touting for business. So it's a lot of personal meetings as well to form a relationship with the end user. So technology is extremely important, but in our business sector, also the human contact is necessary.
Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how efficient or technologically advanced is Charter?
It's probably below 1 at the moment, so it's not even on your scale.
Paolo?
Well, I agree that there is the need for personal contact at some point, but I see the problems we solve are the problems of everyday management of flights. And there is a humongous number of emails and phone calls and messages of all kinds that transit back and forth between teams. And that is a huge cost. It makes the whole system slow, inefficient, unconnected. And I think that all of that should be removed, aside from the personal touch with the customer himself, herself.
Yeah, I find it difficult to see at the moment where the way technology is that you can actually remove the human touch. If you're doing a single sector day, let's say you're doing Luton to Paris and coming back on the same day, that's absolutely fine. You can probably book it online, and if you've used it once or twice, you'll just turn up and it will go. But we've got a client that books with us 6 or 7 times a month, and the trips do start off as London, Paris, return 1 passenger, but they invariably change to additional sectors going in, swapping and changing of the passengers, time changes, and day changes. And currently, that can only be, and that ends up being 60, 70 emails for a change on a multi-sector flight. Now, probably theoretically, the IT can actually deal with that, but you're dealing with people that want to know what the effect is. They don't want to just assume and press a button and sit back and wait and hope that it actually works out. Because without human intervention, a lot of the changes can't happen. You know, if you want to revise slot time, you might be rejected initially by a slot time. The way you get that slot is you pick the phone up and you talk to somebody you know and you push through and get those slot time changed. And I don't think a IT system can actually do that.
So I completely agree that that is the current situation. But let me ask you all a question. How many of you have used a travel agent in the last month? Anyone? All right, 4 of you, 5 of you maybe? Right? 30 years ago, that was unthinkable. Every single person in this room would have raised their hand. So I do agree that it is the current state of affairs, but I also disagree, and that I do believe that technology can change this and can do it at a higher quality and certainly more efficiently, and that's why we don't, for the most part, see travel agents any longer.
So I think that the issue here is that there's a lot of participants in the value chain who are still offline, in the sense that they manage themselves, their service, with Excel sheets. They communicate with emails, and that's not data. Anything which is an Excel sheet or is transmitted by mail is not data, it's information. And if you're trying to encapsulate that in software, you can't. You have to first transform it into data, and then you can automate around it. And this is really what we do. So our push is very much to get all the participants in the value chain, in the air, on the ground, maintenance, you name it, to actually digitize their components so that it can be fully integrated in the value chain, and so that you don't have to spend 60 or 70 emails whenever there is a change.
Paolo, one of the things that makes aviation unique is regulation. You know, it's arguably the most regulated industry in the world, perhaps after nuclear power. The regulators aren't necessarily ready, are they, to deal with the way you want to deal digitally? There's still a lot of paperwork. There's still a lot of filing. Patrick talked about slots. Is that holding the industry back?
Yes, but I think that there too there's a push from regulators. We see it more and more with every new customer coming on. They start bringing us to meetings with the regulator, and the regulator looks at the system and is amazed to see that they can actually save a lot of time and probably a lot of paper as well in accessing directly the software rather than asking the operator. Of course, there is an overarching regulation that requires for the paper to exist, But we are going towards a world where the regulator will have an access to the management system of the carrier, of the operator, right? And we're starting to see discussions coming up, for example, in Malta on this subject. So very much it's going to happen in the next few years. And I think this is really a game changer.
I think this is one of the most important subjects here is regulators. We cannot rely on the regulators. We had a tragic accident here in the UK a few weeks ago with the footballer Salah. This was an illegal charter of every description. It was an aircraft that wasn't fit for purpose for the trip. It was a hobby aircraft. It was a piston aircraft flying at night in bad weather with icing conditions, with a pilot who was no better than a hobby pilot. And our regulators might do a prosecution this time, maybe. But there are so many examples out there of illegal charter. When we look at other industries, Airbnb, Uber, the regulators aren't quick enough. The customers come first, and then the regulation follows. And this is a huge danger with electric aircraft, that the customer will not understand what is regulated and what is unregulated. So the industry must come together now, way before these aircraft start flying. Otherwise, there are going to be so many unnecessary accidents with people flying on aircraft that they just did not know the dangers of.
But so this is really interesting, because if you have more data and you apply transparency by publishing this data publicly, then you give the public the opportunity to actually evaluate what they're buying. In the States, if you go on the FAA website, you can actually see the licenses, the flight licenses of everyone. You can look up my name and you will see if my license in the US is still valid or not. You cannot do that in Europe, and I think that is wrong. So this is one thing, that if the regulators get into the systems of the operators, there is probably an opportunity also to float more information about their AOCs, the validity of the various certificates, the aircraft, the pilots, onto the public, so that they can actually choose. And probably the brokers
the customer has no idea what an AOC is. They don't understand the language.
Maybe there's a role for the broker there to evaluate and explain.
But that actually happens already. When a customer phones up, if they're phoning a broker, I mean, you're almost sort of saying, I should stop using Adam. The customer will come direct to us. And actually, our core charter business operates through charter brokers. I would not wish them to depart. We get 70-80% of our business from them, and they do a lot of the filtering out of the flight requirements. Are we really expecting someone to? It's like booking a train. I still use a charter broker, and it's my wife. I say to her, "We need." Well, I've tried it myself, and I'm obviously not bright enough to be able to do it. But there is such a myriad of issues and questions surrounding, to get my trip from London, Houston, if it's Houston, up to Newcastle, the cheapest fare, the times of the fares, where you've got to change. It needs a people intervention. And also, for a small example, is owner's relief. In terms of aircraft that we operate, if you want to charter the aircraft, we have to go back to the owner, and he or she has to decide whether they're going to release the aircraft. That can't be done on computer systems IT. You can say, well, they set parameters, which we do. We say, what's the parameters in flight time you'll return and the margin we're expecting. But it really just depends. Every single flight has to be costed and agreed with them. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. And we're even talking identical trips that get changed. That's only human beings that can actually do that. So that means you then end up with aircraft that have to be dedicated by the operator, owned by the operator. And for that, in our business sector at the moment, to operate, you have to fly 600-700 hours minimum for the aircraft. We looked at sort of doing something similar with small number jets that seated up to 4 passengers, Cessna Mustangs. We brought 10 or 12 of them back in 2008, and we thought we were going to revolutionize the number of flying hours. We were going to bring the cost down to a lower level acceptable to the general public. It just didn't work. And last year was when we got rid of our last Mustang. It did not. We spent 8-9 years, and there's also 3 or 4 companies still looking at doing this. And I suspect that their profitability, if you saw their P&L, is not actually very good, because you need a high utilization.
Patrick, unfortunately, this isn't a level playing field. And when we built PrivateFly, we had the same business assumption as you, that a business should be profitable. Now, that's not the case. We've been very fortunate that many of our competitors don't care about profitability, so they've educated the market. Victor, JetSmarter, Wheels Up, none of them are near profitability, and yet it doesn't seem to matter. And the same with aircraft operators, your competitors, VistaJet, Air Hamburg, there's a whole list of them who might not need to be profitable. So look at the wave of investment coming into electric flying. None of it's going to be profitable for a long time, and it doesn't matter.
I may say the same also for software. Various operators and all the players have been educated that software should be cheap. And it's actually very, very expensive to build.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's a high capital cost, and to recoup that, you need a high utilization. For a high utilization, certainly in our experience so far, is that people tend to want to travel at the same time, in the morning, come back in the afternoon, or have control over them when they come back. So I'd like to understand from the last speaker, and I'm sure it's probably right, but I just still don't quite understand it, how he gets the cost down to $25. Because even if each eVTOL has 10 people, when you get on a train, there are hundreds of people per train going in at the same time. There are thousands of cars going in at the same time. So you're going to need, it's not an even throughout the day. You're going to have massive peak periods in the morning, massive peak periods in the afternoon, and can you actually provide that service? Once the eVTOL's gone and dropped off, it's got to go back out again to pick some more people up. How many times will it do that? And you're outside the rush hour peak periods.
That's when you charge them.
Charge them it'll be damn sight more.
We have eVTOL surge pricing.
If we can go to the, could we put Slido? We've got some questions. I think the most useful one for you, Patrick, because someone has said it's King's Cross you should be going from to Newcastle.
That goes to show that I never should be going to Newcastle.
But I think that's great. I think at least you've got something from this.
I'll let my wife know in future.
Patrick, sticking with you, is there too much fear about sharing and using data amongst older people?
I think he just called you old. I'm not really sure.
Well, I turned 60 in January, so I don't know whether that classifies as old or young.
But Adam, is there an issue with... One of the interesting things about business...
Well, so to answer your question, I mean, sharing data, absolutely fine. I wouldn't share the passenger names, but I need to check that the passenger wants their data to be shared, generally in terms of numbers. But, I mean, I think the more data we have, the more we can learn from it.
Gillian, is there enough data? Because the interesting thing about business aviation is it's much harder to predict than commercial. You know, Russian guy has a wedding in, you know, a small city. You can have 15 jets that fly in and will never go back there. As an example, you know, there's so many variables. Is there enough data for AI?
Yeah, I mean, I always say there's simultaneously not nearly enough data and way too much. We can always use more, and as we see more sophisticated, you know, onboard computation that you can actually get directly from the aircraft, I imagine eVTOLs will come with loads of this, right? We can do a lot more sophisticated analytics. But to Paolo's point earlier, we have lots of data squishing around out there. We're just not cleaning it up and using it very well. So, you know, if I could snap my fingers and make one thing happen, right, I would suck up everyone's Post-it notes, everyone's Excel files, all of that nonsense that they've got sitting around on their desks, record all these phone calls that are coming into Patrick, transcribe them all, and clean it up and actually make use of it. I mean, I think that's the real challenge in business aviation, is it is still very much not standardized data, and so it's not very usable.
Well, to that point, it's not just everybody's posted it, even the authorities. There is some AIPs are published only in paper. And so in order to have the opening hours of those airports, we should actually get the paper every 28 days and type it into the database to make sure that you're actually scheduling a flight when the airport is actually open. And this is completely crazy.
Anna, data?
Now, we've always loved data, and we've loved sharing data at PrivateFly. We've got a trend report, which we put out every quarter, which shows exactly where our passengers are flying, what aircraft, how much they're paying, how many dogs are on board, what percentage of male or female, and we'll put that on your CGI website every quarter, and everybody can see it. And I think if more people were open to sharing data, then we can inform the customer, which is what it's about, a lot easier. Systems need to improve between us. Patrick, we've got a great relationship over many years, but still it's hard to get one of your aircraft in the air if we haven't paid for it. Now,
well, that goes without saying, really.
That's a good thing. But the banking industry has not provided the private jet industry with a system that works. It closes down at weekends, it's difficult for international payments, and it takes a long time to check that money's come in, and for the customer as well. So that's one example of data being used for a payment process, which can be really improved between us all, having one system that we can all jump on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. In terms of credit, I mean, obviously, people are, well, I would say, maybe you guys aren't, but I'm in business ultimately to make a bottom line cash, a bottom line profit flow. And you need, the trips are not inexpensive. Maybe our cheapest flight might be, say, £3,000–4,000, and we can go up as high as $250,000 on a band tour. You need to know your clients, and for high volume, low value business, the chances are someone's going to use you once a year. You're not going to know the guy or the girl. You need to actually know that the money is going to come through the door, whether it's at the weekend or overnight.
So we've got another nice question from the audience. Basically saying efficiency is going to be difficult until airports and FBOs, which you all agree with. What are the easy wins? Adam, you've been doing this for 10 years, trying to digitise. Paolo, you've been doing. What's the easy wins? Where can you make something efficient faster?
I think if we all agreed to kill email, that would be, and then systems would come out. If you didn't have to email asking for opening hours and customs times, allowing that sort of data to be uploaded, it would transform us. If the number of man hours wasted on emails is incredible.
So that's very true, but we need to offer an alternative. So one of the things that we have started doing is giving UIDs, so unique IDs, to every object that we see. So every runway now has a unique ID. Every parking location in each airport has a unique ID. Every lounge has a unique ID. And so we're giving unique IDs to just everything we see in airports, in the airspace, the aircraft, even the people. And we're going to make that database public. So hopefully, at some point, others are going to start picking it up. And so when we point at an object, we don't have to have a discussion about how to define that object. There is a unique ID.
So I absolutely love this question, whoever Anonymous is. Thank you for posting it. Having just spent the last 3 weeks trying to put all of the data from our brand new preferred FBO network into a standardized format, and seeing that it took multiple engineers 3 weeks to do it. So it's absolutely correct that this is the situation. It's a very similar situation to the early days of the internet, before people really had good unique unique IDs, before we started. Most of you are just using URLs all the time, and you don't think about the fact that there's a domain registrar and there's a bunch of other things sitting in the background doing the work that Paolo was just talking about. So I'm very excited that he's pushing that forward, and we all just sort of have to agree that we're going to actually use, whether it's his or someone else's, or put a standards body together like we see in other parts of the internet technologies, to actually decide what these identifiers are, so people can actually connect them and find them, so that we can get Avinode and Paynode and Flex and everyone else actually talking to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see as much information as being released and put together as possible. For example, on a departure time, on a slot departure, I might be delayed because my passenger arrives late. So that upsets our flight departure, which will then have upset another 3 or 4 flight departures. There might be de-icing. But you might be going for de-icing billing. My de-icing bill could be £1,500, or it could be £6,000 or £8,000. And if that can be actually automated so that but prior to departure, somebody really knows they're going to get an additional £8,000 bill, I can make sure I can get the money in. I mean, I think as an aim to have everything, use IT or AI or whatever one wants to call it, to the best of its possibility. But I think we still have to recognise that no system will be perfect even 20, 30 years down the line. I suspect we will still see people on the phone pushing through, checking things. And that dreaded email might be a form of communication, but it might be a different form of communication. I mean, in our office, we've got a flightware system that we use, which uses Chatter. So I send an email, and we say we don't have emails. Well, Chatter is an email. They're still transferring words electronically.
Well, if I may connect this to the main subject of these 2 days, we will need to put all the data in the system, because with VTOLs, the density and the speed of these services, I don't think will allow for us to send emails or place phone calls. We will need to have all the information about these flights managed digitally.
I mean, Paolo, but I suspect an eVTOL flights, like similar to my example of Luton-Paris, is doing a one-sector movement. So somebody will go to a pickup point infrastructure on the ground. That will take him 20 minutes to get there. He'll queue up for his next turn. That's another 20 minutes, so it's already 40 minutes into his journey. Then he'll get on board his eVTOL. He'll do his 20 minutes journey to a destination. Then he'll spend 20 minutes or half an hour getting back to where he wants to go in the first place. So the 20-minute flights actually will still take probably an hour and a half.
I noticed that whoever wrote this question is now grumping about the fact that we haven't actually answered it. So I will do my best. There are some level of FBOs using FBO1 and other kinds of similar systems, but it's not universal by any stretch. And in the US, we have a just really large number of FBOs that are run by like a husband and wife in the middle of Idaho with, very little going on the field at all. So it's gonna be a while. They don't have the margins to pay for an investment in IT infrastructure, and they don't really have the know-how. But I do think it's happening, just slowly.
Another positive example, Geneva Airport publishing its slot availability online. So simple, yet so many airports don't do that. That's a great start.
We are building also a tool around that, because Geneva is actually leading the way. There is, not sure, about 100 slotted airports in Europe, and they all have different systems. Nobody has provided a unified system or a standard. So we're working also on this as a standard, and Geneva Airport is actually investing time and money in this.
When you've Flex is going to solve everything in aviation, it's going to be great. After that, can you unify Europe and sort out Brexit as well?
We have too little time for that. I think 10 days was being mentioned before.
So here's a nice, cheery question. Is the business aviation model a busted flush? Holding up the advance in personal transportation?
No, I think, again, being positive, when you look at electric cars, it was the wealthy who paid for the research and development. The first guys to buy the Prius were celebrities in LA, and then we've seen that the same with Tesla. And our customers will probably pay for all of this research and development to be at least funded. So the first electric aircraft will be connecting somebody from downtown London, New York, out to Teterboro or to Luton Airport, and so we'll be at the forefront of it.
Yeah, so I would separate business aviation as an industry from the current business aviation model to answer this question. Do I think the current business aviation model holds up 50 years from now? Probably not. But business aviation as an industry is doing all kinds of things. So exactly the kinds of investment pieces, very very powerful people will always need extra security and extra time. That's just fundamentally going to be true. But lots of other people don't really like going through massive amounts of headaches to get on public transportation currently. And if we start to see things like eVTOL or the price point go down on other kinds of charter, you're going to see people move into those spaces. And so I think business aviation is really important. The current model probably needs to adapt a bit.
Okay, any more questions? We're running out of time, so do you each want to pick one question and answer it quickly?
If aircraft were, say, 25% cheaper, would it help the industry? Absolutely. I might even start to consider to buy aircraft again myself.
Great, that was a nice short answer.
I'll take the security question. So data security is, I believe, the pressing issue of our time. Everyone is trying to figure this out from a legislative standpoint as well as within our databases directly. We don't know what will happen if you start to breach aircraft-related data, particularly if you imagine a world in which eVTOLs have everybody up in the air all the time, and those are hackable systems. So I think security is really fundamental in the future.
It's all about regulation. We need to bring the regulators with us if these aircraft are going to fly in Europe and the States. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else first.
So would you pick Regulator Revolution or Charter Revolution?
I'd like to see it coming together. You know, it's all about safety, and we've got to put safety at the heart of it, and that needs regulation.
I'm not sure if revolution is a word that goes with regulation very well. Do we have any? Paolo, sorry, you've got to pick one.
Probably it's on, the equation is on both sides, and yes, I agree. It's not a revolution. It's about transparency. It's about bringing all the information into the same place so that the different actors can talk among themselves over computer software and not over the phone.
Great. We're not going to discuss whether EU member states' civil aviation authority should be disbanded. Hashtag taking back control. Finally, just very quick thoughts. 32% of the audience think your business model is wrong. How does that make you feel?
Excited for the future.
It says it's not a busted flush.
Yeah, but 32% think it is, Patrick.
But that's a minority.
It's a sizable one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we will adapt, and eVTOLs will work. But the timescale of when they work, I question whether it's short-term or medium, as opposed to medium or long-term. And I think we have to, as Adam said, it's safety and security first, and then the practical issues of ground infrastructure, and also getting the end user happy to go on board without a pilot on board. I mean, at the moment, the common issue that gets raised is how many pilots on board have you got? Have you got two? I mean, all our aircraft obviously have two, but there's a perception that they need two pilots on board, whereas actually two pilots, that's the expense of two pilots. I'll be delighted if we can fly them without the pilots.
And on that bombshell, thank you. Thank you very much.